Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we're able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson, and once again, I am joined by Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis. Last week, we showed part one of the Ryan Hall interview, and this week, we're going to show part two.
Part two.
What do you think about that first part? That seemed to go well?
It did. Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from this interview. Every time I go back and watch it, I learn something different. You know, we talked about last week how great of a storyteller he is, and I think if Ryan wants a career in storytelling going forward, he could do pretty well at it. But it's an incredible interview, and I think actually, is it this coming Thursday? You're going to be interviewing Ryan live on Facebook Live. So
absolutely.
Everybody out there can think about their questions they want to ask Ryan. If you've got things that are just itching at you that we didn't cover, then this is your opportunity. If you've got people that would love to be a part of this, get them to join Run Club.
Absolutely.
runforgod.com/Run Club to be a part of this interview. It's going to be pretty cool. Are you excited?
I am so excited. I've talked with Ryan, but I've never interviewed him like you have, and so I'm excited to get a chance to get him on screen and talk to him a little bit.
It may be like a 2-hour Facebook Live.
Yeah,
the way you and him both can talk.
I think he may cut that short, but
yeah.
But yeah. If you've got some questions, hey, send them in ahead of time. If we've got some questions ahead of time, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
where could people send those questions to?
They can send them to dean@runforgod.com.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah. So you guys talked a lot about the mental side of running and a lot about perception and kind of how we think about ourselves and our own perception in that first part. In the second part, and if you haven't seen it, go back. Make sure you go back and watch it before you watch the second part or listen to this second part. You guys were just about to get into the part where you talk about how Ryan became connected with Run for God, which is an interesting story in and of itself.
It's a funny story.
Yeah. So that's where we pick up right here. First, let's hear from our sponsor, the world's greatest digital media platform, J Radio.
You know that moment when you're running and you settle into that perfect pace, and then the next song comes on? Don't let that happen again. With the new J Radio, you can trust us to make sure that the next song in your playlist will help you keep up that pace. Check out the Radioactive station on J Radio for all different genres of workout music, handpicked for you while you run. Start listening now at jradio.com.
She's loving the process.
Well, before we get into your book, I want to take you back a few years. You know, our paths first crossed in 2010. I don't even know if you remember my email to you and what it was about.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was working on this. I was teaching a class at my church. Really had no thoughts that it would ever become anything, and God just kept opening doors to ultimately start a running program called the 5K Challenge. And When I started the class in my church, I was just using stuff I was finding on the internet because it was for 22 people at my church down the road here. And so when we decided to formally write it and publish it, there was some things that I wanted to use that weren't mine. And I knew nothing about copyright and all that. So our publisher said, hey, there's some things you need to get permission to use. And one of them is this story by Jill Ewert on Ryan Hall. And there's also some pictures. If you want to use those, you've got to get. I mean, I didn't know what to do. You know, I was a builder here in Dalton, and I had no idea that I would ever be where I'm at. So I thought, well, we'll see if God's really opening these doors. So I fired off an email to this guy named Ryan Hall, and less than 12 hours, you responded back and said, what do you need? But the video that we watch, or that our class watched by Jill Ewert back then, she was talking about when you were training for what you thought was going to be your first marathon, and ultimately you kind of step back from the sport for a while, and that God was really revealing a lot of things to you about where you had put the sport in your life. I know it's been a lot of years, but kind of walk us back through that time if you
Yeah. Yeah. So there was I think probably the time you're referring to is, so I was actually at Stanford and I was really struggling with my identity. You know, we talked briefly about identity and how important that is, but I was very much seeing like, what made me special and valuable was that I was fast, and it was based on my performances. So when those weren't happening, my first 2 years at Stanford, I got really depressed because I looked in the mirror. I didn't like what I saw because I wasn't performing well. And so I got really depressed, thought I could change my depression, get out of it by going back home, you know? And so I thought I could change what's going on here by changing my physical location, which was obviously a mistake. So I went home, got even more depressed. But I remember having a conversation with my pastor at the time. He's like, what was the last thing you know God was telling you to do? And I knew, like, the last thing I knew for sure God was telling me to do was go to Stanford. And so I was like, all right, I got to go back, you know? So I went back to what I knew God was telling me to do before. And as I did that, I started just riding my bike, and I'd go down to the Stanford football stadium, because there's something about stadiums that just always kind of like captured me, you know? I've just always loved them. Like, whether there's people in there, something going on or nothing, you know, I just love to like be in them and like look around and stuff. So I remember going into the stadium, and I just have, you know, a notepad and my Bible, and I just read and journal. But I started asking God a lot of questions about like, how do you see me, you know? And as I began to hear from him how he saw me, it changed how I saw myself. And I realized, like, there is nothing I can do on the track, on the roads, in running that will make God love me more. Yeah. And there's nothing I can do that will make him love me less. You know, like, he doesn't judge me based on my performance. Like, he sees me through the blood of Jesus, and therefore sees me as like righteous, you know, even though I'm not, even though I mess up, but you see me through Jesus, you know? And so I was like, man, that's powerful. You know, like, I should see myself that same way. And as I was able to slowly kind of shift how I saw myself, my whole identity as a runner changed from, you know, someone who's just totally bogged down with performances and burdened by pressure, self-imposed pressure to have to perform a certain way, to someone who's just like totally free, and being totally free to like go take risk and go and try and run with the best guys in the world. And if you blow up, and it's not a big deal, you know. It's just not, because it doesn't change how important I am. It doesn't change how valuable I am. It doesn't change anything about me. It's something that happened to me. It's not who I am. And that's something you see also really tangibly in the African athletes who are dominating our sport, is they don't wear their failures on their face. Like, after a major marathon, whether it's Boston, Chicago, New York, we have this athlete recovery area where all the elites go to recover, and I'll be looking around the room and I see like the Westerners, and I can tell like that guy had a bad race, that guy had a good race, you know. It's like very obvious. Whereas like the African guys, I have no idea, because like they just don't take it personally. Like, they just see failure as something that's like a natural part of getting great at anything, and it's just a price you pay. And so like, they're all like sitting around having tea, laughing and talking, you know. And I think that's kind of, that inspired me to change my perspective on failure, and be like, listen, failure doesn't change anything about what truly makes me important. So I'm free to go take big risks.
That's awesome. Okay. So he's used this ministry, Run for God, to change the hearts and lives of many people around the world. But there's so many people out there who still say, I can't run. Whether it's, I'm too old, I'm too overweight, I'm too busy. You've heard the list. What would you say to that person who's middle-aged, maybe slightly overweight, and they're just saying, I can't do it?
Yeah. I think it would, I'd have a conversation with them to learn more about their thought process of why they can't run. Cause, you know, if there's something physically going on, like, you know, I was talking to one guy today, he's like, I blew out my knee and like, now I can't run. It's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be running on that. Like, let's let's try something else. Like, what do you enjoy doing? And like, go with that, but, to most people who are just having a hard time, they want to get into running, but they're having a hard time getting into it. I just encourage them, like, running is like a secret club. It's like, it's at its worst when you first start, and like the first like couple months, first 6 months, depends what kind of shape you are in when you start, but it's hardest right at the get-go, so if you can push through, and I think that's why like your guys' program sounds like a great program, where you start just with really small bite-sized step that you can accomplish, and then just grow it from there, just slowly. And then it's amazing when you have that kind of consistency over a long period of time, where you'll look back like a year from now and you'll be like, man, I can't believe I started with a 60-second run, and look at me now running a half marathon a year later. Like, I would have never thought in a million years that was possible. It's just the power of consistency, getting out the door. And that was something I do with myself, because there was a lot of afternoons where we trained twice a day, and I'd not feel like going out the door from an afternoon run. And I'd literally just tell myself, like, I'm forcing myself to get out the door, lace up my shoes, head out the door. And almost every time, like, I was glad I did. And like, I actually felt pretty good, so there are going to be those moments where you got to just put your head down and be like, there is no option. Like, you are going, like, take the debater out. Yeah, no.
You've written a new book, second book.
Yeah.
Run the Mile You're In. Is this, I'm assuming that's Antarctica.
That's me in Antarctica. Day one.
Yeah.
The longest week of my life.
So tell me about this book and how it came to be.
Yeah. So, I kind of mentioned, talked about briefly before, like that kind of clear bookmark end of my career. And as I kind of transition into the next phase of my life, I was thinking about like all that God has taught me about how to maximize my own potential. For me, it was in running, but I think it's relatable to anyone who's just wants to be the best version of themselves in whatever area of life, And it's like, man, God's like taught me so much through my experiences. So I just, sat down. I'd have a coffee every morning, 5 a.m. My house is nice and quiet. And my mantra is like, nothing can stop me at 5 a.m., because my phone's not going off, no distractions. So I just get up and just write for like an hour or two every day. And I was just like, just trying to let God just kind of flow through me, help me remember some of the lessons, the experiences that I had, and then the powerful life transforming truths he taught me through those moments to share with people, so that, I can encourage them as they're on their own personal journey. And I thought a lot about like my 13-year-old self when I first got into the sport. I can remember very vividly doing hill reps in my hometown, Big Bear, and it was snowing, and I was all by myself. It was like dusk outside, kind of like one of those magical runs, and I was just sprinting up and down this hill over and over again. I remember having this thought. I was like, I wonder what it's going to take for me to go to the Olympics, to be the best that I can possibly be, because I didn't know any Olympians. Like, this is like before internet had even really gotten going. So, there wasn't as much information as floating around now. And I just remember being really like intrigued by that. I was like, wow, well, how do people do it, And so now it's fun for me to get to reflect back on and remember all those lessons, and having lived it, to be like, this is what it takes. And these are the lessons, the principles that you have to learn along the way in order to maximize your potential, and then get to share that with other people as their own journey is really super fulfilling for me. It's been great to finally get, this was kind of like my baby, where I was crafting it for 3 months, and then editing process by the end is all like 9 month to a year process. And then to finally like launch it into the world and be hearing how it's encouraging people is just like, oh man, like I'm so glad that I took the time to craft this thing and shape it and mold it and now put it out into the world.
So for all the people out there wondering, they're probably thinking, well, Ryan Hall, he's a superhuman marathoner. He probably didn't write this book himself. He might have had a ghostwriter. This was you and a computer.
It was me and computer. I did have some editors.
Oh yeah.
I think I had 2 different editors look it over and give me their feedback on it. But no, that was my baby. And part of me is going back and forth, because I was like, I am a professional runner, not author, you know? So I was like, I want it to be done like really well. But luckily I had some amazing editors that helped with that process. But, you know, all the thoughts, all the ideas, all the storytelling was all just me sharing from my heart.
Now, if you're like me with my first project, when I got it back from the editors, it looked like my 9th grade literature teacher I really felt smart after I got that back. So, editors are great.
I remember being scared every time I'd open the email and look at it. I'm like,
track changes or so you've always been very outspoken in your belief in Jesus Christ. How would you say that shaped your career?
Man, I mean, like, God is a part of my story in my running from day one when I was 13, and he gave me that vision to run around the lake. So for me, it's just more a matter of being honest with anyone who wants to follow my story, you know. And when I was still running professionally, I felt like it was my duty to be honest about my faith and how that was playing, because it was very real, like playing out. And I wanted to be real with people about that and not be hiding it, because like going back to my 13-year-old self, like I want to know an Olympian. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what helps them get through these moments. And if we don't share what it is that truly helps us get through it, and the answer is God, then we're like doing a disservice to our fans, you know, or to people who are following and want to know what's going on inside of us. So to me, it's just always like trying to be authentic and real with people. And, you know, I don't try and work God into the conversation, but he comes up over and over again as part of the conversation because he's a very real and active person in my life. So, you know, I hope that people can, you know, whether they agree with, you know, my view of God and Christianity or not, like it's still something that they can, that resonates with them and can inspire them, and that they can receive in kind of a non-threatening way.
Wow. Yeah. So no kids to 4 kids overnight. Yeah. So tell us a little about Hannah, Mia, Jasmine, and Lilly. I got a chance to meet them this morning. Just beautiful, awesome young girls. Just tell me a little bit about them and how that come to be.
Yeah, they're amazing kids. So it was actually on our first date at Stanford. Sarah and I were talking, and we weren't like having a serious conversation. Like we were just kind of getting to know each other. But Sarah mentioned, she's like, I've always wanted to adopt, like ever since I was a little kid. Like I have pictures of me with all these like little kids holding hands with them from the time she was a child. And I was like, whoa, like, because adoption is just totally off my grid. Like no one in my family was adopted. None of my friends were. So I just didn't see it at all growing up. So it just like wasn't even on my radar, you know? Whereas Sarah, like there was some adoptive kids in her family and friends and all of that. So she just always had the heart for it. And it's during that time that I started to kind of chew on it and be like, well, is like adoption something I'd be open to doing or not? And, you know, fast forward to, you know, we were married about 10 years before we decided it is the right time for us to have kids. And we decided we want to start the adoption process. And during that time, we'd been training in Ethiopia and just kind of fell in love with the people and the culture and the country. And one thing that broke our hearts, though, was seeing all these kids on the street in Addis and seeing them, you know, not having a good shake at life and being like, well, what can we do about this? So we decided that we'd adopt from Ethiopia. We're originally just going to adopt like an infant, you know, start where most people start. And then, but same deal, we went back to Ethiopia to train, visited these orphanages, and we're number 76 on a wait list to get an infant. And meanwhile, we go to this orphanage and there's all these older kids, like being like 4 to our oldest daughter is 15, but being that age range, and they're all waiting for families. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like I'm waiting for my kid and they're waiting for a family. Like, why are we all waiting here? You know? And after meeting the kids and interacting with them, I was like, these kids are so amazing. Like I'd take any one of these kids home in a second. So we went home, we changed all of our paperwork up. And during that time, we became aware of, our daughters to be, is 4 sisters, and they'd been in an orphanage for about 3.5 years. And they were talking about splitting them up. So they're going to send 2 to one country, 2 to another country, because they couldn't find a family that would take all of them. And, you know, coming from big families, like it's not okay to split up siblings like that, you know, and it was kind of, it was a similar moment that I would feel when I'd go to the front of a major marathon, and into the lead. It's like there's a little bit of scariness and like you're jumping off a cliff kind of a feel. But I always like to tell people, like, for me, there's always either I could follow the path of fear and not run how I knew I was supposed to run, or I could follow the path of love and follow the love that God's put in my heart. And I just felt, love in my heart for our girls at that time. And I was like, I'm going to follow love. And I've never been disappointed when I follow love, compared to following fear. So, we just dove in, and we actually went to Ethiopia and hung out with our girls without telling them we were thinking about adopting them, just so they could get to know us on kind of neutral terms, And so after a week of them just getting to know us, we invited them into this nursing office, and a nurse was translating because they didn't know English at the time. And we just invited them into our family because it's something that is really important. We wanted them to have a choice in all of this because so far everything's been happening to them. They're reacting, and much in the same way we are choosing them, we wanted them to choose us. So we invited them into our family, asked if they would like to be adopted by us. And of course, they were screaming and yelling and like so excited. So that was one of the most precious moments of my life when we told them. And that was the beginning of our family being born. And that was 3.5 years ago. So now they're, here in the States and in school and thriving in school. And they've all learned English and have just come so far. But our family, what's been crazy to me is just how natural it's all felt. Like even being like a biracial family, I thought that, there'd probably be moments where we're out in public and you're kind of like aware of that, and maybe like people like kind of looking at you or whatever. But like, I just don't even feel it at all. Like I have to remind myself we're a biracial family and that we're not a biological family just because it feels so normal and natural to me. So it's been kind of a supernatural experience that way.
That's got to be encouraging, though. It's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you don't even, you're not even aware of that.
Yeah.
So to the young man, the young lady out there who's got Olympic in their eyes, they're dreaming about it. What would you say to the young person today?
Yeah.
Who has dreams of doing what you've done or doing what Sarah's done? What would you say to that person?
I'd just say, I was a big dreamer, dreaming of the Olympics, and you're talking about someone with big dreams. Like, you have to develop an equally big part of you that is resilience.
Right.
Because what I found is, like, becoming an Olympian is not about, like, it is, you got to qualify, right? The top 3, but it's not about, like, just like winning everything. It's about getting up after disappointment after disappointment, failure after failure. A verse that I'd pull on all the time when I was going through my own journey was, though a righteous man falls 7 times, he rises again. And I just love that verse. And that verse kind of perplexed me for a long time because I was like, righteous people like don't fall. Like, why does it describe this person as being righteous? Like it's like contradictory, But as I was kind of like chewing on it with God a little bit, I felt like he was telling me, no, it's his identity that he saw himself as righteous that allowed him to get back up over and over and over again. So it's kind of like what we were talking about before, where it's like, what do you believe about yourself? So what you believe about yourself is going to come out. So let's encourage like people with that kind of a dream, be resilient, but more than anything, like figure out who you are, what makes you special, and how unshakable that is, so that when you do fall, because you will fall, you will go through struggles. Everyone does.
Yeah.
You can pick yourself back up over and over and over again.
Yeah. Okay, so I reached out to some of our instructors and I said, give me some questions. And it's kind of funny the range of questions you get. And we'll kind of go a lightning round of these as we're winding down. First one is, what do you think about when you run?
Well, we kind of chatted about that a little bit. Like I said, sometimes I'm not thinking about anything. Just turn my mind off. Other times, especially early on in a race, like say if I'm running a marathon, the first 20 miles of the race, I'm thinking about trying to be as relaxed as humanly possible. So I'm thinking about relaxing my face, relaxing my arms, shaking out my shoulders. Like, 'cause what happens is as the race unfolds, a lot of times you'll just keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And like, you got to do something physically to like get yourself just relax, you know, like you watch Olympic sprinters and their face is like jello, you know, like our body was meant to perform well when it's relaxed. So really like focusing on relaxing everything that I'm not using in that moment, or even like in my stride, it's like your quads get a break when it's off the ground. Like try and make it as relaxed as possible. And when it hits the ground, try to contract really hard, you know, like
focusing on the process.
Yeah. And staying in the moment, you know, focus on what you're doing right now. Like don't worry too far down the road.
Yeah. Next question is, the 2-hour barrier. I think Nike just did almost a lab test. And it came close.
Yeah.
But not quite there. When do you think that will be broken in a race?
That's
think it'll be in our lifetime?
Question. I think it'll be in our lifetime for sure, depending on how long I live. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like we've talked about, it's a mindset shift where all of a sudden guys are going out in 60 minutes or 59 high, and they're not thinking about it being like a death march like people have thought about it 5 years ago even. You know, now going out in 61 minutes is like pretty par for the course if you're on a flat fast course with the best guys in the world. Whereas like I said, like 5 years ago, you'd be like, dude, you're committing suicide going out that fast. So it's something where it's got to be evolving mindset, and we got to see guys like Kipchoge get close and see, hey, this actually is possible, you know? But I think we're going to see it, and I think we're going to see it sooner than most people are predicting.
Do you think it's going to be, you know, when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, it was like, that can't be done. And then he did it, and then in fairly rapid succession after that, more and more people started to do. Do you think that's going to be how the 2-hour is? One guy does it, and then it becomes more common?
I don't think so, actually. I think this scenario, it's like the level of talent that you have to have in order to run a sub 2-hour marathon is so extraordinary that I don't think there's that many people walking on the planet that have that kind of ability. You know, whereas running a 4-minute mile is a great feat, but it's like there's lots of kids in high school doing that now. And so it's like you don't have to be a genetic freak to run a sub 4-hour marathon. To run a sub 2-hour marathon, you're going to have to be the freakiest of the genetic freaks to do it. So I think it will help, you know, and I think it will help people get closer and closer. And we might see a couple guys maybe do it off the, you know, right away. But I mean, ideally, if we can have 2 guys going after it at the same time in the same race, because they're going to need to be pushing each other all the way to the finish line in order to make that happen.
Yeah. The next question, of course, we talked about you at length in our first 5K challenge. How many crazy Run for God people have come up to you and asked for your autograph?
I've met a few.
I feel like we've known each other by the pictures that I get, because everybody always sends me their picture. I got an autograph with Ryan
from expos, right? Yeah. When I do race expos, I definitely get, you know, I'd say one maybe every, you know, I do like hour signings or whatever, and I usually get about one Run for God, or at least like I see the shirt all the time. Yeah, it's everywhere. So, but I love meeting Run for God athletes. It's super fun. You know, like we share something in common that is really powerful, and it's fun to encourage each other on our journeys.
Yeah. Now, I wouldn't want to finish up without getting you to tell us a little bit about the Hall Steps Foundation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started the Hall Steps Foundation in 2010, as I mentioned, you know, running in New York for the first time. But really, like, that was the answer to the second part of my vision of like giving a gift to run with the best guys in the world, but giving that gift so I could help other people. But it wasn't until after 2008 Beijing Olympics I saw how tangibly you can actually help other people through running. When Sarah and I served as ambassadors for Team World Vision at the Chicago Marathon in 2008, and raised enough money to bring clean water to 90,000 people in Zambia. And I remember we got to go to Zambia after Beijing. I remember being at a borehole, like ribbon cutting ceremony, and this villager was talking to me. He's like, man, I'm so grateful you guys brought clean water to us. He's like, because you guys did this, now the average life expectancy in my household is supposed to rise by 10 years. And I was thinking, how crazy is that? That like we can all run a race and like fundraise and support. And now like 90,000 people are all going to live 10 years longer. Like that's how you like tangibly, very tangibly make a difference and an impact through running. So we know we wanted to continue to support World Vision like we do, but we also wanted to do more and get involved in other projects as well. So we started the Hall Steps Foundation, and that's essentially, it's like Sarah and I running that, and Sarah, runs it for the most part. But so it's, we're volunteers. We don't pay ourselves. So what's cool is like every single dollar people raise goes towards the projects that we're involved in. And we've done projects like we built a health clinic in Kenya. We've done a maternity ward in Senegal. We've done a lot in Ethiopia with childcare, because actually after we brought home our kids from Ethiopia, they closed down international adoption. So now, their country is having to take care of all of these orphans that they have there. And so, we've been involved in helping them kind of try to figure out a foster care system and just how they're going to take care of all these kids. And that's something we want to do post running, when Sarah's done running. We would like to get over to Ethiopia and do more work over there, maybe start a school or something like that. But so people can run for the Steps Foundation, any race that they want to do. They just create a fundraising page on our website. It's thestepsfoundation.org if people want to check it out, and we send them a uniform and they're off and running, but yeah. And it doesn't even have to be our foundation. I just encourage people, like, find something that you're running for, something that's not just you, because like I said, a lot of times, like, I can't control what happens on the day, but if I'm doing it that's ultimately going to benefit someone else, it's very rewarding, whether I ran well or not. I'm like, this was all worth it because it was about someone else and helping someone else.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Okay. So the last question, you're coaching now.
Yeah.
Which daughter?
Hannah, but I only coach her in the off season because she has a good high school coach.
Good high school cross country coach. How do you think your coaching has been influenced? And I really want to know this because I coach a group of kids. How do you think that's been influenced from your career as an elite runner?
Uh-huh.
How do you see things different than a lot of coaches that you see?
Yeah. Man, well, I pull on all my experiences, and the things that I did. Like, it's so easy, right, to look back at it in hindsight and be like, I did X, Y, and Z wrong. And now, like, I know those things. And so obviously I'm not prescribing X, Y, and Z to my athletes, So, but also too, I think a big mistake I made throughout my career was not being flexible. So, like, for example, I'd get a training plan I had to follow every single day, no matter how I was feeling, no matter what kind of little injury I had going on. Like, there was no adjustments, And now as a coach, I that's something that kind of maybe sets me apart about being a little bit different. It's like, I am constantly changing workouts. Like, Sarah had 2 hard workouts last week. I changed both of them, like, as I was based on what I was seeing, And I think that's so important because there is a science aspect of our sport for sure, and we need to pay attention and learn from that. But there's also equally big, if not even bigger, logic, or I call it artistic approach to training, where it's like, you're making a painting with this workout, like, how do I accomplish the purpose of this workout given where my athlete is at today? And it takes a lot of tweaking. So that's probably what sets me apart, is different. And also, I just love, like, to involve the Holy Spirit in things I'm doing. And so when I'm writing training for my athletes, I'm literally like having a conversation with God and be like, what does this athlete need right now? And trying to involve the Spirit in everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, some of our athletes get upset because I have a workout schedule for the whole season, but they never get to see it.
Yeah.
They're going to be, hold me to this,
right.
this. And you're right. It's got to change based on how they feel and what's going on in their life and stress. And well, Ryan, I tell you what, this has been this has been a lot of fun. It's been very insightful. It's awesome to get to meet you.
Yeah,
I can send all these instructors who have sent me pictures. I can send them pictures back now. But I wish you well in everything you do. I'm glad you're a brother in Christ.
Yeah.
And thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, and thank you for what you're doing with Run for God. Like, it's been a big encouragement. The people in the program have been a big encouragement to me throughout my career, and so I just appreciate what you're doing and how you're bringing Christian athletes all together under one flag. So keep doing what you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan.
All right.
Take
Thanks.
care.
All right.
There is power in people's stories.
It's a challenging time. What do you do when everything you believe about God is being tested and God doesn't look like the good father that he says he does?
You've got layers and layers and layers of hate in your heart. It takes God to clean it out.
Your story can help encourage others around the country, just like these stories have. You can walk through a simple process of sharing your story with the Big Share app. Download the Big Share app in your app store to start sharing hope with others.
Boy, it's funny how God puts things together, huh? You may never have taught with Ryan if you hadn't used his story in the stuff that you were doing for the very first Run for God class.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
And of course Ryan was currently an Olympic marathoner at that point, and I just, I didn't think there was any way this bigger than life guy to me was going to reach back out to me, and the fact that he did it in less than 24 hours, it says a lot about who Ryan is.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So down to earth. I mean, you talk to him and it's like he's just the guy next door, you know?
Yeah, like I said, I think I talked about last week when we got done with that interview, I was wanting to try to at least get 30 minutes in this interview. And we got done and I was so excited, and I looked at the guys filming and I said, "Was that 30 minutes?" And they said, "No, that was an hour." Yeah. And it's just because he's so easy to talk to.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to see people at that level be so humble and so accommodating and really want to talk to people who are entering the sport. That's kind of says a lot about who he is. Again.
Yeah, absolutely. His wife is pretty fast in her own right.
She is.
She just barely missed the Olympic team for the marathon this past go around. But who knows, between now and next year, I don't know what they're going to do.
What are they going to do? So they're going to take that?
I guess. I'm not sure.
Because a lot could happen with that team between now and a year from now. So I've been curious about that now that the Olympics are canceled. If you haven't heard, the Olympics are not being held in 2020. They've moved them to July of 2021. So I don't know what that means for the triathlon. My son's a triathlete, and they haven't even held the Olympic trials for that yet. So,
track and field is the same way.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how all that plays out over the next year.
I'd say the marathon is one of the few events that they have had the trials for. So
yeah, and like I said, so much can change in the running world in 12 months' time. So I don't know if they're going to keep that group or are they going to have a new trials. And so I don't know.
It seems so fair and unfair at the same time. That's a hard decision to make. I'm glad I'm not on that board.
Right, exactly.
It's interesting that Ryan talks about struggling with his identity, because it's one of those things where, first of all, when you talk to him, you realize he's a confident guy. Mm-hmm. He feels good in his own skin, clearly. Mm-hmm. But he talks about how when he was at Stanford, he struggled a little bit with his identity. And he talks about coming face to face with God in that struggle. And his encounters seem so poignant. Didn't they seem that way to you when you were talking to him?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think back to my own life and those encounters. When Run for God was born, it's a very poignant and clear time in your life, and it's those times that we can look back on, because we still struggle with our identity today. I do. I don't know about if you do.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's comforting to know that you look back at those times. People say that if you're struggling with anything, and especially are you struggling with where God has you in life right now, or always look back to the last time he spoke. Because when he speaks, it's clear.
Yeah.
And we can always look back to those moments and say, yeah, God was there right then. He was speaking right then. He may be silent right now, but I know that he'll speak again. So, a lot of times the best thing to do is when God is not speaking is do nothing.
Yeah.
But that's where we fall on our face too many times, is we want to help God out. That never works.
Well, not only that, but silence just kills us.
It does.
If it gets silent on this podcast for just 2 seconds, you and I are panicking like, oh my gosh, somebody say something.
And everybody listening is going to be panicking. Like, they're going to be hitting their button on the radio saying something's not right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Our society it's got to be moving constantly. And sometimes God just says, slow down.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about where we're at right now.
And how slow everything is right now.
The government has said, slow down. And wow, there's a lot to be said for that.
I don't know if anybody out there has seen it, and it can be something you looked up. I don't have it here, but it's a quote by C.S. Lewis back in the 50s. I think it was 1954 I had heard. And he had this quote about how the evil one was out there looking to slow us down, and he describes very eerily, actually, the situation we're in right now. How we wouldn't have sports, and a lot of things would just go silent, and that we would turn to God in that time. And so I just pray that is the case.
But isn't it funny how sometimes we wonder who's really at work here?
Yeah.
It's very tempting. My family and I, we're reading through Job right now. And
Oh my goodness.
I mean, that is such a depressing book until you get to the end. And luckily I've read that book a few times now, so I know how it ends. But so many times we think, well, it's the devil at work here. And yes, the devil is moving about here, but God's the one at work. God's the one that's going to use this for his good. We may not see what that good is this side of glory. We may not see it in glory, but we know we can look back at the heroes of faith and know that every single time God used calamity and disaster and wars and everything that we think is horrible, and it is, but it's always been used for God's good. Most
importantly, he is in control.
Absolutely.
The other guy's not in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just being allowed to do some things, but he is not in control.
Yeah.
So
Well, we went down a rabbit trail.
we did, but a good one.
Yeah.
A good one. And the same thing. Same thing applies to our running. Sometimes we're not in control of our running. You think about you talked about the stress fracture recently that you had. You were not in control at that point. You had to do what we're doing now. You had to take a step back and be a little more calm, and that's hard to do.
It is. Because we're not wired that way.
We are not. You're definitely not wired that way.
Yeah. You don't have much room to talk.
Well, he talked about confidence. And he taught, gosh, I thought this was such an interesting thing when he talked about how at the end of the race, he could look at the Americans and he could see who had a bad race based on the look on their face. But when he looked at the Africans, he couldn't tell whether they had a good race or a bad race.
We've talked about that story a lot.
Yeah.
Since he gave that illustration, and it was funny, it was eye-opening, it was sad at the same time that we just wear our emotions on our sleeve, and how we can learn something from those from other countries, how it's just a race. And a lot of those guys, as soon as they got done, they learned something from it, they realized what they needed to do next time, and they moved on. But too many times we don't move on.
Yeah.
We dwell and we sulk, and that's good for just a little bit, but we need to move on.
Yeah, I see that in things like I see something on Facebook that I don't like and I want to comment on, and it's so hard. Why is it so hard not to comment?
How many times have you written a comment and God's just like thumping you on the back of the head and you're like, delete?
Delete. Yep.
And
boy, has that happened.
I think my wife has told me before, you need to take an hour.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
If you still want to send that message or that email or whatever it is, after an hour of thinking about it and praying about it, then maybe you should. But it's never a good idea in the moment.
Yeah, no, it's not.
I need to tell myself that a lot.
I tell my athletes that they have an hour to sulk after a race. If you want to be miserable about your race, then you can do that for an hour. At the end of that hour, I expect you to be back to normal.
Yeah.
Because an hour is long enough for us to feel sorry for ourselves.
Right.
And then we're ready to get back to it. So that's a good rule of thumb for all of us when it comes to anything, really.
Yeah.
He talked about how running, in particular, which is different from a lot of sports, is running is at its worst when you first start.
Yeah.
It's at its most difficult. And I think about that because I think about other sports like golf. I've played golf. Golf was just really just fun when I first started. It didn't hurt. It didn't bother me to hit a bad shot.
And then the better you get, the more miserable it gets.
Yes.
And that's why ultimately I stopped golfing.
But running is completely opposite of that.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
the hardest at
That's
first.
where everybody listening, if you're part of the 5K challenge right now, you're thinking about starting it, it's bad at the beginning. You know, those run walks, it just feels like you're just never going to be able to do this. But you get out past 2 or 3 miles and it doesn't ever get easy, but it gets much more manageable, and it becomes much more enjoyable the longer you do it.
Yeah, I was going back and forth with a fellow not long ago, somebody who is part of this run club, George Williams.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he was doing a kind of a Jeff Galloway method thing where he was walking and running, and that he wanted to get to a point where he could run longer. And we had some conversation about that, and he was able to do that. But it took some discomfort in order to get past that. And George, if you're listening to this today, I hope things are going well, and I hope you're actually running longer now than you were then.
We need to talk about George's story one day.
We do. One of these days.
We're gonna tell that story one day, because that changed my life.
Yes.
George's story. So
Yep.
So yeah.
So this whole thing, I remember a person who was in one of my classes one time, and I would tell her, "It's getting easy, isn't it? It's getting easy, isn't it?" And she would go, it's getting easy. It never gets easy.
Yeah.
I've run. I think at my last time I calculated, I think I have run somewhere between 80 and 100,000 miles in my life. It's still hard some days. Ryan in this interview, not just in this interview, everywhere he goes, he's outspoken in his faith.
Yeah.
There are pictures of him pointing up to the sky and at the end of races, and it's clear when you talk to him that that's one of the first places that his mind goes to.
Well, and I asked him about that. I asked him about his faith and how he's outspoken, but he says, he made the comment that it's not something that he thinks about. And that's so refreshing to see that, it's sometimes you'll see people, they're trying to interject their faith. And I don't like that. I don't feel comfortable with that. But it's those people who, if we're truly in God's word, we're truly in prayer, that's just going to come out. It's who we are. It's part of our vocabulary. And it's refreshing to see, because that really is who Ryan is. It is who he is.
Yeah, and I think when he's not consciously looking for those opportunities to share his faith, but he is consciously thinking about it when the opportunity comes up. And that's what you're talking about is a lot of times we're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get my faith into this conversation? Right. Whereas if we'll listen to the conversation, a lot of times there's a good response to what we're hearing. And it would be great. And, one of the things that he said that I just loved so much, he said, it's just a matter of me being honest. And I thought, wow, that's powerful. To me, that was powerful to hear that.
Well, it's powerful to those you talk to, because if we're being honest about where we are with Christ right now, if we're not trying to put on this front, people can see phony. Yeah. And I've been guilty before. You're thinking, I need to interject this here, but when we're just honest about where we are, whether it's good or bad, sometimes the best witness to people is your struggle.
Yeah.
And we don't always have to put on a happy, good face, because this isn't always easy.
Yeah.
Our walk with Christ, those runs we're doing, they're not always easy. And sometimes it's the struggle that speaks to people more than the good times.
You're right.
Because a lot of times when people are dealing with something heavy and their life's a mess and they don't know Christ, they don't want to hear your canned message about how good God is.
Yeah.
They want to hear your story.
Yeah.
And that's why we always talk about our stories, how they're so powerful, because even if even if you think you don't have a story, you do. And your story is going to speak to somebody so long as you're honest about it.
Yeah. And there's always somebody out there. I'm convinced. One of the things we talked about last week was about how Ryan talked about how we go through things today and we bring them into our future and use them in our future. And that's what our story is. Yeah. It's a tool for
Every
us to use in our future.
Is a story.
That's right.
And we're to take those stories, those experiences, and use them going forward to draw people to Christ. You know, we just mentioned George, and one day we will tell his story, but a little bit about the story with George is I was having a horrible day. I didn't want to talk to people, and my bad day turned into something incredible for George, and it just took honesty for that to happen, and luckily that day I was just very honest, and let those stories be tools in your toolbox going forward to point people to Christ.
Ryan talks about this whole thing. You asked him about going from no kids to 4 kids overnight. I can't imagine. I'm thinking about it. I've got 2. You've got 2.
And I'm still trying to figure them out.
Yeah, mine are grown. They're out of the house. Great young men with great young wives. But I can't imagine 4. I can't imagine 4 kids, but I especially can't imagine 4 kids that are kids all at the same time.
From a different country.
From one day to another. Yeah.
Who don't even speak your language.
They don't even speak your language.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. That's, if you, yeah.
I love the thought that where he said, though, that he wanted to invite them into their family because
that's something I've never heard before.
Yeah.
That was
what a great testimony to who he is. We want to love you. We do love you. We want to love people like Christ loved people, but we want to make sure that you feel good about this too.
And isn't that the perfect picture of what Christ is standing there doing for every one of us?
Absolutely.
He's not forcing us. He's not getting the adoption papers and pulling you in. He's saying, I'm here. I want you to be part of my family. But it all comes down to our choice.
Yep.
And, the quicker we can understand that our God is not a, I don't know what
fire and brimstone.
Yeah, he's a loving God,
yeah.
and he wants us to come in. And there's so many people out there that if they can just hear that and understand that, and if you're listening today and you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, we always use the phrase "He's standing there knocking." Mm-hmm. It's just exactly what Ryan talked about. He's sitting us down and saying, "I want you to be part of my family."
Yep.
But I want it to be your choice.
That's right.
And that's a game changer.
And not only that, but I think about the response of these little girls because he talked about how they got so excited and they were jumping up and down. Isn't that a great picture, too, of what we should be doing when we realize who we are?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Golly, that's amazing. He made this comment. He said, I've never been disappointed when I follow love. What a mouthful.
We can learn something from that
every
goodness. Day, especially today.
Especially,
grace, love, patience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on out there right now that's testing our patience. Whether it's the grocery store's out of toilet paper or you can't go to the park you want to go to because it's closed. It's very easy to lash out right now. But now more than ever, I'm convinced that God is at work in this, everything that's going on, and we're either going to be able to step up as Christians and show grace, love, mercy, or we're going to fall flat on our face and we're going to mess things up for our testimony.
Yeah.
Because right now is the time where we need to step up as believers and show the world grace, love, and peace in a world that is lacking a whole lot of that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he goes on, and another question that you asked him was about, if there's somebody out there looking for an Olympic dream, what would you say to them? And I think about the way that he went after, and the way he goes after everything, including his relationship with Christ, like a rabid dog. Mm-hmm. He latches on to what he knows to be right and true, and doesn't let it go. Now, he has bumps along the way. He admitted that when he was at Stanford, there were some bumps. So it's important to understand that, but that in context of what we were just talking about is really powerful.
Yeah.
He talked about the Hall Steps Foundation. If you don't know about the Hall Steps Foundation, you can Google it. You can find out about it. They work all over the world. They've been in Kenya, Ethiopia, Senegal, several other poorer nations. And the idea is for them to create better, healthier, safe environments for those folks. Their kids came from Ethiopia.
Yeah. Go check out their website, the Hall Steps Foundation. It's eye-opening.
Yeah.
And it's just another testament to what he and his wife Sarah are doing around the world, using this sport as their platform to do it.
Yep. They're living what they're talking.
Exactly.
They're putting their actions where their words are. And you know, Ryan and Sarah, they do a lot to share what God has done and is doing in their lives. And the truth is that we all have platforms. We're using one now. Everybody out there has a platform. Your platform may not be running. It may be, maybe you're a nurse. Oh gosh, how many stories have I heard of a nurse who prayed with somebody who just needed to hear that at a time? Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you're, it doesn't matter what you do. There's somebody next to you. There's somebody nearby. There's somebody that you can share with.
We all have a platform.
That's right.
And we all have a story. So we just need to put those together.
And God wants to use us. I'm convinced that God wants to use every single one of us.
Yeah.
One way that you can be used is you could become a Run for God coach. It's one of those things where if you just love running and you love God and you want to see people come to Christ, it's a great way to do it, right?
You know, it's so rewarding. You know, we tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if you're taking the class or you're teaching the class. It's going to change your life. And I'm convinced, and maybe it's because we deal with instructors so much that we hear these stories so much, but I'm convinced that the instructor or the coach, more times than not, is the one changed.
Absolutely.
I know it was in my case. I know it was in your case.
Yep.
And I can list a whole list of coaches that we know who have told us their story and how doing something outside their comfort zone that shares their passion for not only running but for Christ, how it radically changed their life. It changed their perspective. Some even come to know Christ through this process. And if you're out there and we need to warn you, a lot of people out there are just like I was. Their first response is, I can't do that. I'm not that great of a runner, which I wasn't. But I don't know the Bible as well as I should, which I didn't. But God prompted me and convicted me to do this, and I thank Him every day that I did. Yeah. I'm still not that great. I'm a worse runner now than I was when we started this. I don't know the Bible as well as I should. I'm working on it. I work on it every day. But I don't think we'll ever get it right on this side of glory. So don't allow yourself to use the I can't excuse with doing anything.
That's right.
So if you're out there and God's convicting your heart right now that you need to do something more, go to our website and check out how to become an instructor, and we'll walk you through the process.
runforgod.com. Go check it out.
Yeah.
Hey, we hope that you've enjoyed what Ryan has shared with us. We're going to be online live with him here in a few days, and so make sure that you join us there and watch him as we talk a little bit with Ryan on Thursday night. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate what you do as a Run Club member. Thank you so much. You're helping us share the gospel with folks all over the world. So now go out there and shine your light wherever you are.
Good job, Dan.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.